Chapter 14, Premonition. Both you and your unit performed admirably, Commander, Cecilia Zavi commented to Shar Aznable. I must say that was quite a feat, destroying 9 enemy ships in a matter of minutes. I understand Junior Grade Lieutenant Cusco Al was piloting the Elmeth. Shar knew Cecilia was pleased, but he also knew her position in the Zeon hierarchy was eroding. He had no idea what had happened in his absence, but she and her brother Jiren, the Supreme Commander, were clearly on even worse terms than before. Perhaps, he thought, she had deliberately antagonized Jiren by placing the new Type Corps under her direct control. Cecilia turned to the other officer in the room, Commander Garcia Dowell. I want you to give top priority to locating more new type candidates, she said. Things are going so well I might just make the new type unit the centerpiece of our space attack forces. Krishia's statement, Shar realized, was symbolic of a larger problem. She was a military leader who had once possessed considerable insight into problems of strategy and tactics, but now she was beginning to lose her perspective. The attack on the Federation's LH moonbase had been a highly useful test of the new Type Corps. It had been important to use the unit in actual combat and assess its potential. But the most surprising discovery had actually been that the Federation's Gundam model mobile suit was apparently back in action and more powerful than ever. Shar had, in fact, been grateful that Lieutenant Chaliabul was on his side. The man was a godsend, even if he was a spy sent by the Supreme Commander. He was mature and awesomely aware of everything around him, and the test sortie had proved he would stand firmly behind Shar as long as he understood his goals and deemed them worthy. Cusco Al, Cecilia continued, addressing Char again, has proven quite a successful graduate of the Flanagan Agency, hasn't she? Indeed she has, Excellency. And your future plans for her? It's simple. We'll put her out in front in the Elmeth, and myself and the other Rick Dom pilots will support her. She's highly capable. Good. As long as you have faith in her, Commander, I'll leave the immediate combat decisions up to you. Our next mission starts in 24 hours. As you know, in some of our other operations, the regular military hasn't done as well as they should have, and we can't leave everything up to them, which is why I'm asking you and your team to make an extra effort. You understand the situation, of course. Yes. Shar was beginning to regret some of his own words. Cecilia was Cecilia, and perhaps because she was a woman, she was quite capable of seeing through his own plans. Women had that special way about them. I want you all to get some rest tonight, Cecilia said. From now on, the new Type Corps, the 300th Autonomous, will be the center of our operations. Shar knew there was an element of sarcasm in the way she had said, center of our operations. In the final master plan conceived by the Zeon forces and codenamed Revel-I, the Abawaku forces would be used as a decoy to draw out the Federation fleets so that Dazel's forces from Solomon could destroy them. Krishia's warship, the Swammel, would then lure the surviving Federation forces into position so they could be annihilated by the solar ray cannon being developed in the system project. There were still several hurdles to be overcome before the plan could be properly initiated, but Krishia's impatience was evidence that it would start soon. For Cusco Al, turning to Commander Garcia, Cecilia asked anxiously, we currently have 6 Rick Doms and only 1 Elmeth. What happened to the plans for reinforcements? She had gained a great deal of confidence in her new type unit and already wanted to strengthen it. Her logic was simple. The greater the number of people and machines, the better. Excellency, Garcia replied. It's a matter of what level of performance we want to maintain. We have about 20 potential candidates for the Corps. Why not enlist them all? She demanded. Shar interrupted. Excellency, allow me to be frank, but we should be careful here. The issue's not the number of pilots we have. Even at our current strength, if we just refine our teamwork, we can completely annihilate a large enemy force. The most important thing is to have experienced, seasoned pilots. For now, I strongly recommend against a hasty increase in the unit. I think I understand what you're trying to say, Commander, but it certainly should be possible to train other candidates in combat as part of a separate, detached force. But don't worry, I'm not asking you to undertake their training. Thank you for your consideration, Excellency, Shar answered. I'll try to ready my own unit as fast as possible. He saluted, did an about-face, and started to leave. Cecilia said something to Garcia on his way out, but he was not listening. Outside the office door, Cecilia's secretary promptly rose to her feet and greeted him with an, "Always pleased to see you, sir." Something about the way she said it surprised him and temporarily put his mind in a different mode. He knew he had other business to attend to. Cusco Al, for example, was upset, and he had to help calm her down. But he said it anyway. "You have plans for this evening?" he asked, his face mask glinting in the light. All 6 Rick-Dom pilots in Char's unit had returned from the attack on LH with a kill to their name, and all were relieved because the new suits had performed better than the old Zaku model. And the members of the unit seemed to function superbly as a team. No one made snide asides about having such a young leader. They were all battle-seasoned veterans, perfectly capable of recognizing and appreciating Char's skills as a leader, and his remarkable ability to calmly appraise even the most desperate situation. His choice of route to attack the Federation LH moonbase, for example, had seemed treacherous at first, but had allowed their hit-and-run strategy to succeed. All of them, including Lieutenant Chalia Bull, had also been brought closer together by the mutual realization that they might have something profound in common, that they might be true new types. The result was an unprecedented sense of solidarity and trust, a feeling that they could always depend on each other for aid during combat, and that as long as they worked together as a team, as comrades in arms, they might avoid death in battle. It seemed almost as though they were connected by a thread of consciousness, as if instead of 6 individuals, they were a single unit with 6 sets of eyes watching out for the enemy. Although physically unable to see what the others observed, they knew how the team was moving and positioned, and when one team member felt the shock of sighting an enemy, the others could sense it too. And when their Rick-Doms returned to base and they looked up at each other's suits, they felt a union of spirits. It was a good feeling. There was only one qualifier to their sense of solidarity. It did not guarantee that the pilots liked each other as individuals outside the team context. She certainly got the potential to. Char and Chalia entered the briefing room together and found Lieutenant Cramble refilling. "You come here to make fun of me?" she asked. "This isn't the time or place for that, Cusco," Char said. "How do you feel?" Cramble deferred to both Char and Chalia, offering them a seat. "Everyone's so considerate around here," Cusco said. The bitterness in her eyes told a different story. "We're only being nice," Char said, "because we're thinking of our own skins. Cramble here's probably the only one being nice out of pure altruism." He glanced at the man and then added, "We're worried about the team." "Think you can sleep tonight?" Chalia added. "That's our concern now. I'm sorry about all this. I'm sure I'll be able to go out again on a mission tomorrow. I swear I'll do my best. We heard you were having headaches and nausea, and we're worried. I know it's rough to work with the Psychomu interface. I'll be fine." Cramble piped up from behind Cusco Al. "We rechecked the Elmeth system, sir. During the fray in space with the Federation forces, only Cusco's Elmeth had survived a hit from the Gundam. The beam had in fact been a near miss, but the diffused particles on its perimeter had caused more than minor localized damage. The blast, equivalent to a direct hit with conventional explosives, had momentarily knocked Cusco unconscious and had left her in a state of shock. She had never been hit before, and equally disturbing, she had been hit by a far-off marksman. Until then, she had easily detected the Federation ships deploying themselves around the LH moonbase. They were far easier prey than the remote-controlled target ships she was used to practicing on. She could practically see curdling waves of fear emitted by terrified crews inside the metal hulls. But her basic temperament made her take combat too lightly. It allowed another flare of consciousness, a narrow thread, to infiltrate her mental space and allowed an enemy to snipe at her from afar. To her, the talk about a Federation new type unit had been just that, talk, so that when the alien thought waves had come toward her, she had had no idea what was happening. No one had ever told her she might have to fight another new type, not even Char. He had never fully comprehended the battle he had witnessed between Amuro and Lala in Texas, and even if he had, it was doubtful that he could have explained it to Cusco. New-type battles were far too new a military development. If Cusco was too ignorant of new types on the Federation side, she also had too much confidence in her own new-type potential. She had forgotten that people were often controlled by their immediate emotions, but that there was a time lag between an emotional response and one based on rational thought. Cusco handed her coffee tube back to Cramble. She looked at Char and Chalia and said, "Guess I'm not as smart as I thought I was." It was a spontaneous comment, but both Char and Chalia knew it was spoken from the heart. "Nobody's all intelligent, Cusco," Char said as if to console her. "That's why the teamwork's so important. Remember what we said earlier about being nice to you to save our own skins? That's what it's all about helping ourselves by helping the team. That's all it takes to make the team concept work." "The commander's right, Cusco," Chalia added. "If you just rein yourself in a little, we'd all get along better and work together better. It's important not to overestimate yourself in this business. And by the way, the final maintenance check on the Elmeth is scheduled for tomorrow morning, so we need you to get some sleep. Let us know if you need any pills." Cusco removed a pin from her chestnut-colored hair, and in the weightless environment it fluffed, framing her face. Then she stood up, grabbed the nearest lift grip, and left the briefing room area, her long, attractive legs flowing behind her. "She'll be useful in battle," Char said, "but the Federation's rapidly acquiring the same capability. It's safe to assume their Gundam model mobile suit, probably piloted by Amuro Ray, is back in action. Don't forget that he's the one who destroyed Lala-san. The leaps in ability that he's making suggest a powerful new type." Chalia added, "And don't overlook the mobile suits they're deploying around the Gundam, including the gun cannons and the GMs. They're formidable foes in their own right." "The Elmeth is what gives us the advantage," Char said. "Without it, we'd be exactly matched in strength. I just hope we can become the core fighting unit Her Excellency expects." After taking off from LH, the Pegasus II's unit gradually linked up with the main forces around the Federation's FS beachhead on the far side of the moon. Every conceivable type of supply and repair unit was involved in the operation in a supporting role. Even elite reinforcements from Luna 2, the Federation's ace in the hole, joined the growing fleets, leaving almost no effective reserves in the entire Federation. Yet not a single ship in the vast armada had received concrete word of its final destination. After a meeting on FS, Lieutenant Bright Noah returned by launch to the Pegasus II and summoned all pilots. "Thanks for coming," he began. "Within 18 hours our unit, the 127th Autonomous, will move from its present position toward Area 365, so all preparations must be completed by then. We'll be supported by 2 squadrons of Cosmo fighters, whose ETA is 2,000 hours. At 2,100, we'll have a joint operations strategy meeting with their pilots. That's it for now." The mobile suit pilots looked around at each other, knowing their time had finally arrived. Hayato Kobayashi had the honor of speaking for the rest. "What's going on, Skipper?" He said, "I know you can't tell us our target yet, because you probably don't even know yourself, but the Pegasus is basically a mobile suit landing craft. We're not designed as a full carrier for fighters." Bright stepped up to the captain's seat on the boom crane in the middle of the bridge area and sat down. "How the hell should I know what's going on?" he said as he began to check the ship's internal communication system. "That's why I called you all here. Lieutenant Commander McVeary of the 203rd Squadron is in charge of the Cosmo fighters. He's a veteran combat pilot, and I know he won't get in our way." "I bet we're going to attack a Bawaku, right?" Kai said. "Yeah," Hayato added. "I'll bet General Staff thinks we're a pretty easy group to get to do whatever they you think want." "Hey, you're just using us?" Amuro asked. "Yup," Kai answered. "Cymbalo. It's an archaic type of musical instrument, sort of like a piano. What's that got to do with what we're going?" "Probably nothing. Somebody in General Staff probably just liked it. Maybe it's like the time part of a poem was used as a code name in a campaign. I think it was the poet Paul Verlaine's line, 'With long sobs the violin, throbs of autumn wound my heart.' When was that, sir? Amuro asked, suddenly impressed with Bright's crudition. During an old global war in Europe, if my memory serves me correctly. Mirai glanced at Amuro, but first addressed Bright. There's something about all this that bothers me, she said. When I read Amuro's combat report, it almost sounded like he's some sort of Esper or something. I bet headquarters is relying on that, and using all of us on the Pegasus Tattoo as a sort of secret weapon. What do you think, Amuro? Do you think if this war's ever over, we'll be able to lead normal lives? Think new types will really ever be accepted back in society? You're jumping ahead too much, Mirai, Amuro answered. Do you think we're true new types? I'm still not sure we've done anything to really deserve that label. He leaned back against one of the windows on the bridge and glanced up at Bright in his perch. Having checked the ship's intercom system, the skipper was sipping coffee from the tube used in a weightless environment. Wait till the mass media get a hold of the idea, Bright said in between sips. But Skipper, Amuro responded, nobody's really even come up with a precise definition of what a new type is yet. It's too early to even think about how people will react to them. Amuro, Sayla said, don't forget what happened to Zeon Zoom Daikun. He advocated the new type concept and wound up being persecuted by the Earth Federation, and people knew a lot less about new types then than they do today. Everyone on the bridge knew Sayla was right, and Mirai replied for them. I'll say, she said. Just wait and see if the Pegasus survives this war. For sure, Amuro will be treated as an ace, a new type ace. The mass media will love it, and for better or worse, new types will be presented as something they're not. Man with supernatural powers, Bright added, tongue-in-cheek, a telepath. I can see the headline already saying, Lieutenant Commander Amuro, the Federation ace who can read your every thought. Bright said it as a joke, but Amuro knew he and Mirai were probably right. He tried to imagine how he would respond if it all ever came true, but gave up. It was too depressing. But by the time Mirai's fears were realized, he and all the other core crew on the Pegasus would hopefully be a lot older and wiser and better able to deal with it. You surprise me, Mirai, he said. I always thought you were more of an optimist. I'm sure it'll work out. I hope so, she responded. But something about it all bothers me. Sayla, what do you think? I just can't help worrying. Maybe you're worrying too much, Sayla replied. You have been working awfully hard recently. Well, in that case, Mirai joked, turning to Bright, maybe I could get a break after this meeting. Normally implied, and supported by a growing new type awareness. The crew had few chances to talk in terms that all understood and appreciated, but it was opportunities like these, however fragmentary, that they needed. Most were not yet evolved enough to create the extreme understanding and psychic harmony that Amuro and Lala had experienced. They still needed more peak experiences of communication. Shar Aznable sometimes felt the same way, and perhaps this was one of those moments. But he certainly had nothing that specific on his mind now. He was proud but not arrogant enough to give priority to such personal philosophical questions, not when he was lying next to Cecilia Zabi's secretary for the first time. My real name's Margaret Ring Blair, Commander, she said with a smile, and it's my real name. Shar had a naturally suspicious mind, but with one sentence Margaret had managed to disarm it. She laughed, let her full-bodied hair fall over her face, and then looked up at him. You look awfully scary, she said, not looking at all as if she meant it. She kept giggling as if she were somehow able to see through the serious facade of his life, and even laugh at it. There was something about her innocent mannerisms that he liked, something about the way she could see through people, yet not offend them. He might even be able to fall in love with her, unfettered by the sort of savior complex he had had with Lala's son. Deep down, he was an extraordinary idealist. And because of his idealism, he was normally incapable of totally trusting or loving any individual, incapable of even making his only sister happy. Love, he believed, was an ideal. Love should be perfect and pure. Physical love, he believed, always condemned a man to remain at a physical level. In the case of Lala's son, only his desire to save her had helped elevate his love to a higher plane. Does the, scar on my forehead bother you? He asked. He was bemused by his own tongue-tied manner. Shyness was an aspect of himself that he could scarcely imagine in his normal military persona. He couldn't recall ever asking Lala's son what he had just asked Margaret. Well, it is rather ugly, she replied bluntly. Not a pleasant sight at all. But frankly, I think it looks rather good on you, Commander. Forgive me for saying it, she hastened to add. But I just wanted to be honest. It doesn't bother me. Really. Thanks, he replied. You're being kind. You're everything I imagined when I first met you. He cursed himself for phrasing it that way. It seemed like that was the only sort of thing he was ever capable of saying. I want to love her and tell her so, he thought, but I don't really know her well enough yet. Perfectionism was a tragic shortcoming in his romantic character, one that always seemed to emerge at times like these. He liked the way she interacted with him. He liked her sincerity and the way she didn't pressure him. She gave him such a sense of relief that all his senses, normally so taut, relaxed. As long as he felt her body next to his, it seemed there was nothing to worry about. Who cares about new types? He thought. Turning around as she moved slightly next to him, her cheeks had a glow to them, and her full lips were formed into a smile. With his left hand he traced the lines of her full waist and suddenly, spontaneously wished she could bear his child. It was something he had never dreamed of with Lala's son. Perhaps it occurred to him, humans often acted on impulses like that, and then spent the rest of their lives trying to reconcile them with reality. There was something interesting about that idea, something to savor. He could hardly remember what it was that had attracted him to Lala's son and why he had tried so hard to look after her. It was time to sleep. Lieutenant Commander McVary's 203D Squadron, with its 12 Tomahawk Cosmo fighters, was stationed on the upper deck of the Pegasus II's leg section. With the squadron and its support units, the Pegasus had finally taken on the organized hustle and bustle of an active warship. It was a new ambience that helped offset both the basic manpower shortage on the ship and the extremely informal atmosphere that existed among the original crew. McVary, a dyed-in-the-wool space pilot, epitomized the change. He had the type of personality that had to be experienced to be fully understood, an informal manner that coexisted with a cautious approach bordering on nervous obsession. Wherever he was on board, he liked to yell out, "This thing's not a warship. It's a den of disorder and poor training. I feel like I'm off to play war with a bunch of kindergartners." Slegger Rowe and other Pegasus crew members often made cracks about McVary, saying that he's riding awfully high on his hobby horse for a newcomer to the ship. McVary would then do an immediate about-face and always claim his willingness to defer to the Pegasus crew. And in the next breath, since the mobile suit unit had been ordered to form the Tomahawk Squad's rear guard, he would threaten to shoot down anyone who moved into his field of fire. Poor McVary, Kai liked to say with a laugh. He's just upset because he's stuck in the Cosmo fighter ranks and he'll be there forever. Kai and the rest of the crew had a tendency to belittle the ability of both McVary and his squadron, but in reality Cosmo fighters still played an important support role for warships. The crew took McVary more seriously when he remarked that no one would be likely to survive the coming mission. They knew the 127th Autonomous, the Pegasus, the Cypress, and the Graydon, was headed for Area 365, and that it had been assigned such scant protection because that was all the Federation was willing to spare until the fleet reached its as yet unknown staging point for the Simbolo operation. Once in Area 365, they would have no contact with other ships in the Armada. Area 365 formed one point of a triangle completed by Zeon Solomon and Abawaku space fortresses. To venture into this area meant that the 127th was being used as a strategic sacrifice. Put more politely, it was a decoy, or at best a feint for the larger Armada operation. They were, in other words, on their own. McVary put it in his typically eloquent fashion. The brass obviously have a hell of a lot of faith in this new type stuff. I think me and my men were dealt a lousy hand when we were assigned here. But let me tell you, I won't be easy bait. I'll take out at least 10 or 20 Zakas. The 127th Autonomous left the sunlit moon behind it and sailed toward Area 365 at primary combat speed. Bright, the skipper of the Pegasus II, had a special operations file with information about their exact destination, but its lock was programmed not to open until 12 hours had elapsed. Along the way, the Gundam, gun cannons, and GM-324 and GM-325, piloted by Ensigns Sarkis McGovern and Kriya Maja, practiced flying in attack formation, accompanied by 4 bull machines from the other 2 warships. The exercises had no strategic value, but they helped keep the mobile suit pilots in a state of readiness. When Zeon's mobile suit unit had attacked the Federation's LH moonbase, few of the Federation pilots or crew members had even spotted the Elmeth, and fewer yet had realized it was piloted by a true new type. Some crewmen listening to friendly radio reports had detected a mysterious, dissonant sound that had seemed to reverberate deep in their brains before the Elmeth had fired its first blast. But those like Sayla, who had realized what the sound meant, were a rarity. Only Amuro had intuitively known the enemy was part of a new type combat unit and deduced its true strength, and only he had understood that its destructive power exceeded that of Lala's son. His main regret was that he had never confirmed the exact number of attacking suits. They had simply been too powerful for him to worry about counting, and they had not been fooled for a minute by an attempt to divide their forces. When up against an enemy like that, he wondered if it was really fair to rely on Kai and Hayato and their gun cannons, but he was encouraged by their performance. They had increased the speed with which they could come to his support, as well as the level of their teamwork. With them, he knew he wouldn't have to worry so much about being caught with his rear exposed. But he hoped he had acted correctly. He was plagued with doubt that he might have tried to maximize his own chances for survival at the expense of his friends. His own desire to survive the war had suddenly been strengthened by knowing Sayla intimately. It was odd, because the notion of fighting for the chance to sleep with a woman, even to protect her, somehow skewed whatever sense of ethics or propriety he felt should exist on the field of battle. He was still naive enough to believe that fighters should be inspired to risk their lives for more noble causes, such as overthrowing a dictator or preserving democracy. Yet somehow his experience with Lala's son had hinted at an entirely different possibility. It was a possibility he believed existed in his new relationship with Sayla, too. It transcended physical sexuality, men and women, women and men. Amuro was becoming aware of a potentially new world. Amuro Ray in G3, ready for landing. Go ahead, G3, but be careful. As he closed in on the Pegasus II after practice, Amuro saw Sayla appear on his 3-inch communications monitor, almost as if she were right there talking to him. Then he heard First Deck Petty Officer Callahan's sleigh giving directions vigorously. 2 minutes on the horizontal axis, correct to the right. Roger, he called back, keeping a careful eye on the flight floor of the first deck looming up at him. He imagined Callahan watching wide-eyed, checking the Gundam's entry into the ship, probably reacting the same way others had when he had first piloted the Gundam on Side 7. I can't believe this. Lieutenant Commander McVeary's eyes flashed under his thick eyebrows when he first saw the 16-meter-tall Gundam mobile suit parked in front of the mobile suit elevator. Amuro removed his helmet, held it by his side, and tried to change the subject. It wasn't a very useful practice, sir, he said. I don't care what anyone says, McVeary sputtered, but that thing still looks like a giant toy robot to me. Landings and takeoffs must be hell, no? Not particularly, sir, Amuro said, ignoring McVeary's astonishment. I was trained for suits from the start. From his reading of history, Amuro knew that at the beginning of the 20th century, under the old calendar system, the battleship faction in many navies had often been unable to adjust when aircraft were first introduced. Similarly, as a seasoned veteran, McVeary was probably still attached to the good old days, when Cosmo fighters had been in their primacy. If he had a problem adjusting, it was understandable. The mobile suit concept had taken root only about 5 years earlier and had been proved feasible in combat only when Zeon's Zaku model had been developed. It was no wonder he still saw them as giant toys. Without waiting for Callahan to officially announce the safe return of the other suits to ship, Amuro drank a bottle of liquid vitamins and floated up to the briefing room. Bright was already there, and the rest of the mobile suit pilots slowly drifted in one after another. Then McVeary entered with his Cosmo fighter pilots. "What are they doing here?" Amuro whispered to his skipper. "I wanted them to hear you give the debriefing," Bright announced. "You're the leader of our mobile suit unit, and we may be involved in a joint operation with them." Amuro didn't like the idea. He was still in the process of learning, and the idea of giving a presentation in front of Lieutenant Commander McVeary and his men, all older combat veterans, would be like the pupil lecturing the teacher. "Don't worry," McVeary said with a grin. "We won't get in your way." He was chewing gum, and the noise irritated Amuro. "Be aware of the physical conditions and environment you're operating in. But there's something important beyond that. Recognize, be aware of what you see, store it as knowledge, and remember, there's a lot more out there to look out for. Your senses have got to be wide open, reading information from every direction to catch it. Sure, you need the instruments in your cockpit, but remember, you can't always rely on them. Mostly, you've got to ignore them because the enemy isn't going to jump out at you from inside your instrument panel. He's going to come at you from outside your suit. The moment you forget this, he'll take you by surprise. Now, maybe what I'm saying sounds like a contradiction, but anyone who doesn't understand the logic behind it sure as hell isn't a new type, and probably isn't even qualified to be a regular pilot. Wouldn't you agree, Commander McVeary, sir?" The sudden question caught McVeary by surprise, but he grinned and said, "They'll never understand it that way. You're making it, how shall I say, a little too conceptual. For a lad like you teaching your peer group, you've got to make things more concrete, specific, down to earth. Understand?" "Yes, sir," Amuro replied. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Sayla enter the room, apparently off duty. McVeary continued, "I think you're talking about something like the ki, or spirit, that martial arts people refer to. You're saying we can detect this, and we'd better not forget it, right?" "Exactly, sir," Amuro replied. Then he continued, "And when we face an enemy new type unit, the ki, for lack of a better term, is transmitted in an even more clearly defined form. It's sort of a situational pressure you can sense, an almost evil force you can feel coming toward you. Being able to sense this in a way makes it easier to confront the enemy. But the problem is that he's faster than most normal opponents. Infinitely faster. Which means that there's only one way to respond, and that's by operating almost reflexively, by anticipating the enemy's moves in advance. Judging by everyone's performance today, though, you guys would all have been blasted to smithereens. Even you," Amuro said gently. "What about me?" Hayato next asked. "Sorry, you're being a little tough on us, aren't you?" Hayato complained. "Sorry, but the important thing is to figure out what to do about it. Remember, I'm assuming a Xeon new type unit attacked our LH base. As I mentioned yesterday, I think the pilot of the Elmeth mobile armor is a new type and even more advanced than the one I encountered on Texas. I say that because there was even more interference with radio transmissions around LH than we would normally find with Minovsky particles. That's why some people claimed they actually heard something inside their heads, and that's why it should be clear to everyone that we're talking about something utterly different from normal radio waves. Whoever or whatever was out there emitting those waves is our enemy." Amuro knew he still wasn't explaining things very clearly, and it irritated him. He wasn't used to standing in front of people and lecturing, but while he was talking he thought of something totally different. During the confrontation with the Elmeth over LH, he had suspected its pilot was a highly evolved new type whom he would face again soon. But he had sensed more than a simple desire to kill him. He had sensed something dark, brooding, and ominous directed at him. A personal hatred with an almost masculine edge. For that reason, perhaps, it hadn't occurred to him at the time that the pilot might again be a woman. Now suddenly, for a reason he couldn't understand, he wondered if it might not have been Cusco Al. Perhaps everything was all a matter of fate. That notion had occurred to him once before when confronting Lala Sun, but the here and now transcended fate. He had to live in reality. The presentation continued for over 2 hours, and when the discussion turned to close-quarter combat tactics, McVeary and his men finally left the room. In parting, the lieutenant commander said, We're obviously living in different worlds because, frankly, I can't understand this stuff. As far as I'm concerned, this Xeon new type unit you're describing is. Combat veterans tend to be conservative and to cling to whatever methods worked for them in the past. They see little merit in adopting other tactics. In warfare, if a new unknown tactic is adopted and fails, there are no second chances. As the other men left the room, Amuro questioned out loud, "I wonder how many are really ready for what we're going to encounter." He loosened his pilot suit and sat down, wondering when on earth the Federation would develop the perfect suit. His underwear was cold from his sweat, and even his socks were damp. His toes felt like they were swimming. Only Sayla was still left in the briefing room. "Amuro, as long as you're leading the mobile suit team, I know things will work out," she said as if to console him. She was still pondering something she deeply regretted, that she had ever mentioned killing Shar Aznable. Ever since leaving Side 7, she had felt a tension inside her. But during the short time she had spent with Amuro in his room the other night, it had left her. Perhaps, she worried, she had opened herself up to him too much. She had spoken impulsively and created a rift between them. If Amuro was a real new type, she had thought he would have been able to deduce what she really meant and not dwell on the words themselves. But she knew she had made a mistake. She had been too naive. If anyone could really read another's mind, know his history, and know why he actually said something, that person would not be a new type. He would be God. New types were distinguished by a superior intuition and their remarkable hunches, but they were not mind readers in the true sense of the word. If anything, they were distinguished by a superior ability to read their own minds and understand information ordinary people might overlook. But if one could know one's own mind, would that extend to the spirit? If so, might it not be possible to extrapolate the truly universal aspects of oneself to others and through this bridge truly rid another's mind? Unfortunately, such a feat would probably require that both parties be similar new types. Sayla and Amuro were fundamentally different. "I grew up with a complex about my real family, Amuro," she said. "And sometimes I don't trust people." She knew he was probably too naive to understand what she was trying to say. But in order for him to expand and grow as a new type, she felt it was important. She looked at him, unable to apologize or retract her statement about Shar. If she did, she knew he would probably feel attracted to her for all the wrong reasons. Amuro, for his part, didn't press the matter. He was fiercely attracted to her, but on the eve of a major battle he wanted to keep his emotions in check. But it was hard. He looked up at her with a tired expression and said, "Sayla, can't you feel it?" "Feel what? Wait. It feels sort of like a wall of pressure, I guess, and it's spreading out toward the Pegasus Seku." Sayla thought she finally understood what he was saying. The weight he had referred to was something spreading, menacing. Well, maybe. That's why he mustn't be killed, and as long as he isn't too self-righteous about what he's doing, we ought to cooperate with him. Cooperate? With my brother? It's only an idea. But if he's the type of person I think he is, we should cooperate as new types. But Amuro, the people you're talking about, are the ones who are causing the war. Things aren't so simple. The Zabi family aren't the only ones to blame. Nor is our crazy mixed-up Federation government. It's the whole system. I know. That's why we've got to find a way to end the war as fast as possible. Then we can work to eliminate the root cause of it. Sayla knew Amuro was right about her brother. That was probably why Shar had always avoided confronting her directly when she tried to stop him. "Amuro," she said, "I always wanted Casval to be my brother. I never wanted him to be Shar Aznable. Listen, Sayla, I don't know your brother at all. But as long as he's the Red Comet, he's the enemy. And if I meet him in combat, I have to fight him. I have to protect myself because I don't have any guarantee he feels the way I think he does. But there's something about him I kind of admire, and I think a lot of other men in the Force feel the same too. That's just because you never had an older brother. Maybe. It's true I always wanted one." Amuro's voice betrayed a trace of resentment. Sayla was surprised at his emotion. It had never occurred to her how hard it must have been to be an only child. "Sometimes I think it's easier being alone, Amuro," she said, suddenly feeling like a little girl. It's a lot easier than having a brother you love and then losing him. Amuro said nothing. He stood up and left, slamming the door behind him. What should I do? Sayla thought. The room felt suddenly chilly. Monitors on the wall showed scenes of each launch deck. Everything was quiet. She knew it was dangerous to have illusions about what new types could or could not do. Yet she was seized by the desire to follow both Amuro and her brother no matter what happened.